Hi friends, in this video we are going to deal with the article titled Adverse Possession under Transfer of Property Act 1882. The author of this article is one Miss Shivani Sharma, who after completing her LLM from IMS Unison University, Dehradun and various internship programs is doing freelancing in legal field. To know more about the topic, let's quickly move on to it.
Today's topic is adverse possession. There are various questions which comes in our mind after listening this adverse possession. So let's clear your confusion here. So what is adverse possession? Adverse possession is a legal principle that states that a person can acquire legal ownership of someone else's property. In order to do so, they need to acquire possession or reside on that property for a certain length of time. So now typically the form of property is basically land. So if the adverse possession is successful after following certain requirements and conditions, there will be no requirement to compensate the owner for the property or receive their permission. Adverse possession is also known as squatter's right. So now how the adverse possession works. So the rights and conditions for achieving adverse possession vary depending on the country. For example, in the US, there are 5 main conditions that the adverse possessor must follow to be successful in claiming ownership of someone else's land. So during the process of adverse possession, the original owner can recover possession of the property through legal action. So English law states that if the original owner does not exercise their rights and attempt to recover their property within the certain time period, they will lose the right and the adverse possessor become the property owner. So over the years, however, the legislations changed the lengths of the rulers. For example, in the US, the time available to the original owner varies between 3 and 40 years depending on the particular state, whereas in India the time limit is 20 years. It is important to note down that the personal property can also be adversely possessed and however, the rulers in such a situation are stricter and typically favor resides within the legal owner. So now what is the importance of adverse possession? Adverse possession is very important to understand because as a property owner, you need to be aware of what can happen if you are not utilizing your land. So in addition, if you are interested in a particular property, having knowledge regarding the regulation of an unused property may be beneficial if you want to become the legal owner. So overall, the idea of adverse possession is important because it ensures that the land is used efficiently. Now, if a legal owner is not making use of property and is becoming deserted, someone willing should have the ability to take over the land and utilize it efficiently. So now we are going to discuss about historical background. So the idea of adverse possession came from England around 2075 and created with a view to allowing a person to claim the right of cession from his ancestors. So many thought that it was difficult to enforce the original law in cession. And around 1623, a statute of limitation had been enacted in a place where allowed an individual in possession of the property for 20 years and or more to gain title to that property. Now, the early English policy was intended to prevent legal battles about property rights that were time consuming and expensive. So the doctrine was established to avoid the wasting of land by requiring owners to control their property or suffer the loss of title Subsequently, the definition of adverse possession was introduced in the USA. Now, what are the elements establishing adverse possession? So, first element is continuity in adverse possession. The possession and the occupancy of the property by the trespassers or claimant shall be continuous and uninterrupted and unbroken for the entire statutory limitation duration. Now, second is hostile possession. Hostile possession means that the claimant or occupier is occupying the land despite knowing that he or she does not hold any legal title to occupy or possess the said property. Now, possession must be aggressive from the start and must continue throughout the limitation period. So, one from the hostile occupation arises when the claimant enters and stays on the land under the color of the title. So, third is actual possession. So, actual possession means an adverse possession must be actual possession, such as the construction of a house, the erection of a shed, or some structure, the fencing of a property, the grazing of cattle on the ground, the farming and harvesting the crops of the land, the planting and cutting the trees, etc. for the whole statutory limitation period. So fourth element is exclusive possession. So during the statutory limitation period, the claimant must be in sole physical possession of the property against the legitimate right, assertion and title of the rightful owner or other claimants. So now land developments, the building of the house or the erection of boundary walls are example of exclusive ownership. It must not be taken possession of or pseudo possession. So there are some acts that does not constitute adverse possession. I am going to mention them. First is permissive possession. It cannot be converted into an adverse possession, particularly where possession is lawful from the outset unless other transparent actions have been committed by the occupant that will have that effect of denying the title of true owner. So the permissive character of possession can be inferred from the circumstances of the case, even without clear evidence. So as soon as the plaintiff shows his intention that the permissive possession would cease, the permissive possessor would cease to enter the property, and if he does not do so, his continuing presence would be incorrect and would make him liable to surrender possessions along with mesne profit. So second is absence of rightful claim. Now in this case of Palyanidhi Malyavaran versus Dada Malai Vidhayan, it was contended in this case before Honorable AP High Court that about adverse possession by a trust, that the right to trusteeship of a temple cannot be acquired by adverse possession so long as there is no lawful trustee who could claim to recover the office from the person who claimed to hold it adversely to him. Now, third point is absence of sufficient animus or intention. So it is intended to claim that the exclusive title which make possession adverse animus possidendi must be proven along with the manner of occupancy by the squatter, which again varies from type to type. Now, it is a well-known principle that the fiduciary relationship, that the possession of the agent is possession of the principal, and therefore the existing relationship between the parties cannot be permitted to be adverse. So there are some laws which are related to adverse possession. Now we are going to discuss that. Now let us look at the law governing the concept of adverse possession and the trend in India. So the Indian Limitation Act 1963 deals with the adverse possession, and the same applies to section 27, article 64, 65 and 112 of the schedule. So first is section 27. that is extinguishment of right of property. So for instituting any suit for the possession of any property, any person needs to fill the suit within a limitation period, else his right to such property shall be relinquished. So second is according to Article 64 of the Limitation Act 1963, the limitation period is prescribed of 12 years from for a claim based on the previous possession, not on the title. The date of dispossession will begin from date where the plaintiff has been when the plaintiff has been disposed. So after that, Article 65 of the Limitation Act provides a time limit of 12 years for a suit for possession of immovable property or any other interest on the grounds of title, and the term shall begin from the point at which the possession of the defendant becomes adverse to the plaintiff. So after 65, there is Article 112, which prescribes a limitation time of 30 years for any suit brought by the central government or any state government, including the government of Jammu and Kashmir. The limitation period shall begin from the time laid down in the same suit by a private person. So now it is evident from the above provisions of the Limitation Act that if the claim for the possession is not filled within the prescribed limitation period, then the right of the owner based on the title or possession shall be extinguished, and the owner who has the possession of the immovable property shall become the owner of by the right. So it is also important to note down that the section 27 of the act is an exception to the general rule. So there are some other exceptions. That first is if the owner is a minor, second is if the owner is mentally unwell, third is if the owner serves in the armed forces. So property dispute continues to rise in the world, and owners should be very careful to avoid such circumstances. So being aware of these laws which will help the owner learn how to prove adverse possession in a court. So in a case, Supreme Court held that the case name Amrendra Pratap Singh versus Tej Bahadur Prajapati. In this case, it was held by the Supreme Court that if an unauthorized person is having the possession of an immovable property adverse to the owner for a period of 12 years, then the unauthorized person acquires title on the account of the default or inaction on part of the real owner. So what is adverse possession in India? Basically in India, owning a property is not an easy task. After saving up enough to buy a decent property, owners are always under a constant threat of losing their property through some scam or dispute. Did you know if a property is occupied by someone for more than 12 years, they will be favored towards it in the court, not the owner. So this is known as adverse possession law. So now the question which comes in our mind is, can tenant claim adverse possession? So tenancy through lease or rental agreement is generally not considered under the adverse possession law in India. However, under certain circumstances, if the lease has expired or if the owner has defaulted on particular mentioned in the agreement, the tenants have taken leverage of the situation to file for ownership through adverse possession, then the set time for the owner to take action is for 12 years. As soon as there is a breach of contract, the owner should took for vacating the tenant to avoid adverse possession. If after the termination of the agreement, the tenant has paid rent to the owner in any form, then they can't apply for ownership through adverse possession. So there are some landmark judgments which I'm going to tell you. SM Kareem versus BB. In this case, it was held that the adverse possession must be continuous without force, and a plea need to be filed informing that period of adverse takeover. And the second case is Karnataka Waqf Board versus Government of India. It was established that the possessor need to be established possession of 12 years without the motive of illegal occupancy, but due to neglect by the property owner. And the next case is Dadabai versus Abbas Gulam Rustam Pinjari. So in this case, it was established that the possessor must admit ownership of the suit after informing the owner. So now I hope you all liked my video. Thank you so much.